Welcome back to the channel, everybody. And today is my number 20 team in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Miami Dolphins. Talk about a busy team with a busy offseason. Just recently trading Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith for Minkah Fitzpatrick. We'll talk about how that kind of changed their ranking a little bit. They did fluctuate quite a bit here because there was a little bit of banking on Jalen Ramsey not being on the team. But then to pull Minkah Fitzpatrick, that was one hell of a move. I think in the grand scheme of things, it kind of works out for them in the end because I think when Jalen Ramsey's contract, you were looking at maybe a 4th or a 5th round pick at best. For them to be able to pull Minkah, that was a pretty big move, especially because of how weak their safety room was moving into that. Now, their cornerback room is in shambles as of right now. They haven't gone out and signed Asante Samuel Jr. yet, even though he's on the market. Maybe they go and do that and it changes the ranking maybe just slightly. But it's not this big time signing that's going to save this team. And talk about a team notorious underachievers, it seems. And unfortunately for them, it seems like the window is continuously closing on them. Tyreek Hill's a little bit older. Tua's injury history just continues to haunt him. The running back room is having a lot of turnover. They lost Teron Armstead, a lot banking on Patrick Paul to step in and be a great left tackle for them. The injury history of the edge room that just continuously puts them on the back burner despite how much talent they have there, which does actually help this ranking out significantly. And overall, what is this team going to even be when it comes to the big time? Oh, excuse me. Woo! The big time moments. The big time moments have always seemingly passed these Miami Dolphins teams by. Even Brian Flores really laid the foundation for Mike McDaniel to come in and bring that offensive guru-ness into this organization, which I think he did pretty well. I think he elevated Tua. But in the big moments, he's really failed as a coach. And there's this thing about, does he actually have control of the locker room? Is it a real organization? You heard Raheem Mostert sort of talk about how it's kind of a childishly run organization in Miami. And that is unfortunate, to say the least, that would be the commentary of what's going on over there because of how talented and the high IQ of the coaching staff, particularly Mike McDaniel. But that's what we'll get to here. We'll jump into the head coach and the coach rankings starting with the head coach. I promise. I'm fine. The head coach, Mike McDaniel, and he is just an 80 grade, the 20th ranked head coach here. The thing about Mike McDaniel, like I was sort of talking about at the top, it does feel like he doesn't have a full grasp over the locker room. He's the cool coach. He's the young guy. He's like, hey, fellow football players. Hey, he's got that attitude to him. He's a great mind. He's got that nerdy mind to him, but it just doesn't seem like he's fully taken the reins as what a head coach is supposed to be. Very good play caller. Good play design. He's done a great job with Frank Smith, who is my 15th ranked offensive coordinator. Smack dab in the middle. I think he's very serviceable. I think as a unit, they put together generally a pretty good offensive plan that sometimes is poorly executed. I think that there's, ego issues that have to be under control, but I don't think McDaniel has that authority figure, and I'm not sure that he even seeks it out. When you look at Pittsburgh with Mike Tomlin or Kansas City with Andy Reid, you can see that there's how do I even describe it? It's like who the boss is, and it seems like Mike McDaniel's out here just trying to be. It comes across like he's just, we're buddies and we're friends, and hey, maybe you want to run this play, and I think it hurts the overall culture of the team and the culture of the locker room because, like I did say, the window that was wide open there for a couple of years just seems to just be closed now. And I don't think anyone views this team as remotely a contender anymore. They're kind of in this weird purgatory cap-wise because you got Tua, you got Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, you got some guys on the defensive side. what can Mike McDaniel do as a head coach to improve this team with who he's got? Like, is the foundation strong enough here? And is it his fault that it didn't happen? I think to a large degree, Mike McDaniel should be a hot seat coach. I don't know how the Dolphins organization necessarily views him. The fan base seems to be torn on him to a large degree, because I do think he's such a great offensive mind, but sometimes that's just better suited for a coordinator position. And he sort of has outstayed his welcome. I think he's stayed here longer than other coaches would be allowed to stay based on the results that they've gotten, because he's such a high level mind. They're committed to it, and they see the offense execute at such high levels. You see, how exciting they can be. You saw what they did to the Denver Broncos, for example. Like, they're capable of such great things when they got it together, but for this to sustain an entire long season as an overall organization, is Mike McDaniel the right guy for the job? I think those are legitimate questions. You guys tell me what you think. And Frank Smith, he's a good Robin to the Batman for the offensive side of the ball. It's hard to rank him any higher than this, just because, it's Mike McDaniel's offense. It's his. He's, at the end of the day, he's the one that makes the final call, the last decision on everything when it comes to the offense. So how much is Frank Smith going to be able to do? I think this team might, if Mike McDaniel starts to be a little bit more serious of a CEO type aspect of the head coaching job, then maybe Frank Smith can bring a little wrinkle to it with his own philosophy, and it might change some things, at least in terms of how they produce on a consistent level from week to week. On the defensive side, Anthony Weaver is my 21st ranked defensive coordinator. He's got an interesting mix of young guys on the staff, and he's got some Joe Barry there on the staff, which I know Packer fans are LOLing really hard about because they couldn't wait to get rid of him. But hey, some people just aren't great head coaches and not great coordinators, but they're good position coaches. They're good consultants. I think Anthony Weaver still has a lot to prove, though. Granted, I don't know that he's been given necessarily the fairest hand, especially last season when the top two edge rushers on the team went down. You were left with rookie Chop Robinson. You lost Christian Wilkins in free agency. Your cornerback room is just, outside of what you had with Jalen Ramsey, what was there really? But that's also on him as well. Cam Smith not developing, things like that. So now he's got Minkah Fitzpatrick in the safety room. So maybe that changes that around a little bit, at least on the back end. But can he develop some corners here? Can they sign a cornerback that he can put in a position to succeed, so that way you don't leave Ashton Davis and Minkah Fitzpatrick just hanging out to dry every single drive on the back end? So the work is cut out for this staff, and I don't know that they necessarily have the high-end ability here sort of across the board to meld up a team that can compete with the better teams in the league the way that maybe I think people thought of it last year and the year before that. Weaver probably could stand to play a more aggressive style, especially getting the two injured edge rushers back, Phillips and Chubb, to mix with Chop Robinson. I think he's got a good little mix there, kind of like what you see with Shane Bowen and the Giants, where they got those three really good edge players, the two veterans with that up and coming prospect. So I think coming up with something creative in there, I think it opens up Anthony Weaver to be more creative than maybe what he was last year, where he probably just didn't have the pieces that he felt he could do anything other than just play like a more basically run defense that I think overall ended up hurting the team. And that's kind of what, when you get high-end injuries, that's what that does. But now this is Anthony Weaver's opportunity to show that he can be maybe creative. I think with the style of offense they play, he could probably stand to play a much more aggressive defense, because if the offense is going to be playing fast, then it's up to the defense to get themselves off the field as well, because the offense is going to be running gun, fast, running the clock, quick runs, gadget plays, Tyreek Hill down the field, lots of speed on that offense. So Weaver's defense is going to be, if they don't play an aggressive style, they're going to spend a lot of time on the field. If they play a little bit too conservatively and just sort of allow teams to nickel and dime until they get a big stop at some point in time, you don't want the defense to just get worn out. And I think that could be a problem for this team potentially as the season goes on. So how Anthony Weaver designs his defense, but then also Mike McDaniel, it's his job to have an overall team strategy. And it seems like the team strategy has been you play fast. is that what's necessarily best for this team? Maybe they could stand to maybe slow it down a little bit. They did bring in Ollie Gordon, Alexander Madison in the backfield. Maybe it's not just that Achane and Raheem Mostert and Jalen Wright, where it's just speed. Maybe it's Alexander Madison to just sort of, bruise the opposing team up a little bit. Maybe it's using some of those, you got multiple tight ends. You don't really have a starter that's breaking out there other than Darren Waller, but he's not a traditional tight end, and who knows if he even plays. Maybe you run some bigger packages there and try to beat up on the opposing team a little bit. Change it up, because what you've been doing, it clearly has had a ceiling that is below high-level success. So maybe Mike McDaniel decides to sort of go a different direction, as coaches that are feeling the heat on their seat will sometimes do. They'll change a little aspect of their team to try and raise the overall production. So we'll see how that ends up working out. But as of right now, it is a bottom half of the league coaching staff overall, from head coach through the coordinators. But little tweaks here and there and a little maturing, I think that they could outcoach these rankings, I think, for sure. Hopefully I've collected myself from earlier in the video, and I've gotten it together enough here for this ad break that doesn't feature any ads. Seems to be a pattern here in some of these videos. Please subscribe, like this video, and it'll help push it out to the algorithms, and then I'll actually be able to annoy you with a real ad break rather than just this fake one that I'm jumping in, telling you to do that YouTube thing. Smash the like button, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, and let's get back to the video. Tua Tagovailoa is their quarterback. He's my 21st ranked quarterback with an 83 grade. It sounds like I'm going to take a big crap all over Tua, but I assure you I'm not. He's just, when you lack the arm strength that he lacks, it does put limits on what you can do as an offense. It puts limits on what you can do even as a player and production-wise with some of these guys that you have. Now, when he does throw the deep ball, he's pretty successful at it. Now, there's not a lot. Obviously, he doesn't have the arm strength, so it's a lot of, quote-unquote deep balls, more so than actual deep balls. But even in the short to intermediate areas, he's not really performing at these super high levels either, at least last season. When he was kept clean, he was a B+, and play action, he was sort of middle of the pack. When he was blitzed, he was middle of the pack. When he was under pressure, it wasn't good at all. So there's just something that needs to be... It is a very tough evaluation with Tua, because we've seen him play really, really well when the offense is really executing. But he only had 11 big-time throws. He did have 12 turnover-worthy plays. His adjusted completion percentage is 79.8, but that just means that he's not necessarily putting the ball downfield, but he's also putting the ball in harm's way. So with these limitations that Tua has, it does make the defense's jobs a lot easier. And I think in these early years with Mike McDaniel, you saw him design an offense that really worked for Tua's skill set. Now, you flip that on its head, you give defenses a lot of time. Tua's skill set, you can't really develop arm strength. It's really hard to develop like elite level arm strength. That's sort of just something that you got or you don't got. And, there is the injury concerns with Tua as well. So how long do you want him standing back there in the pocket to let deep plays even develop, right? I think that's why it's important to have a lot of these fast guys that they have on the offensive side of the ball, because it allows you to get the ball out quicker. Because the last thing you want is for Tua to pick up another injury, another head injury, and then it's really all over for him. He's kind of on his last legs here. So can you do better than Tua? It's like he's basically become like the next generation Kirk Cousins almost, where, like his floor isn't terrible, but does he have the ceiling to create championship level football? And I just don't know that he does have that. I think that's why you go out and you draft Quinn Ewers from Texas, why you strongly apparently consider getting Dylan Gabriel from Oregon, especially with Dylan Gabriel being left-handed. Have you just picked up another version of Tua, left hand and all, without the injury concerns? I would watch for them to go out. I think it was Kurt Benkert who put it out there at first, especially with all the influx at the quarterback position in Cleveland, that maybe they don't bring in Dylan Gabriel in some sort of a trade to make him the backup to Tua if Quinn Ewers doesn't, wow them in the first, couple weeks of training camp. Because, like I said with the coaches here with Mike McDaniel, maybe changing up the strategy, the offense a bit, the offense that he was running fit Tua perfectly. I think that's why they were able to win games and get to the playoffs and all that. But it also put them in a position where they couldn't really get over the hump and become like an upper crust team, no matter how well people were projecting them going into the season, no matter how much faith people had in them going into the year. And I don't know that Tua is ever going to be better than this 83 grade. Because there's so few quarterbacks that have Tua's limitations that end up being these top level players, like you have who has Burrow has quote unquote not great arm strength, not elite level arm strength, but he's so good between the ears and he's so good pre-snap and he's so good with adjustments and so good with his vision and decision making. And his ability to push the ball down the field is still there, and he's not afraid to do it. It comes across like Tua because he knows that he can't throw that deep ball with much effectiveness at all. And keep in mind, deep ball is just 20-plus yards down the field of air time. So, for what is a deep ball for Tua is not necessarily always what a deep ball is for, say, Patrick Mahomes. So, to get the ball to that 30-yard mark down the field and put it on a guy with an amount of strength for a safety or a defensive back not to cut it off, I've never really seen Tua play with that level of confidence unless the player's just wide open. But even then, you'll see him underthrow guys deep down the field when they're wide open, guys like Tyreek Hill, who then have to catch the ball, catch the ball, and then good thing they had quick acceleration to get back to full speed to actually finish the play and score in those scenarios. But a lot of the success the Miami Dolphins have had is in that short to intermediate areas, on those big crossing routes where these players are so fast and so quick at getting separation that it becomes a really easy reading situation for Tua as well. It allows him to read only one side of the field at a time on a lot of the plays, which is generally something you do with like rookie quarterbacks and experienced quarterbacks, backup quarterbacks. You make their job really easy, but because of all the speed he had out there, it ran like a well thought out, intricate offense when if you really look at it, it's really not that. It's a lot of bubble screens, a lot of drag routes, a lot of double moves, a lot of just reading the safety and throwing it on either side of him deep down the field, figuring out where you had single coverage based off of that. It's not overly complicated. And I think that this offense could get themselves to the next level if they could get a quarterback who can execute a more complex style offense, because eventually, like I said, the defenses have started to pick up on this and they're starting to put pressure on Tua and they're starting to play some press coverage and they're starting to be able to anticipate what the Dolphins are going to do on offense depending on the situation, because they understand Tua's limitations and know that Mike McDaniel's not going to put the ball in harm's way or put Tua in harm's way. More importantly than that, it's almost like now at this point, after that really serious head injury, ever since Tua came back, his skill set hasn't changed, but I think that there's like a trepidation on all parties right now to put him in danger, and that hurts the offense as well. And I think the 11 big time throws only is a very significant sign of that. And I think his poor ability under pressure and his, below average ability versus the blitz, I think it speaks to his mentality in those situations. Even when he's kept clean, to get just a B+ grade, it's like there's a part of him that just isn't in the moment as much as it should be that you see from other guys like Burrow and Mahomes and Jane Daniels, even though it was his rookie year. And, I think that Tua, as well as I said with Mike McDaniel, Tua's like a hot seat quarterback here. because, you bring in, if McDaniel's gone, I don't see the new regime having much to do with Tua at their quarterback. It's sort of, you've seen what you got out of him, and maybe it's time to move on. It's a steep fall for a guy that I definitely once considered to be somebody who could press for an MVP award just 2 years ago. It's crazy how quickly these things can change, and what ends up happening when a guy does have just limitations he can't overcome. Going to the weapons now, they are 19th, tied for 19th, 19th to 20th. It is it's a group that that could be so great, but has the potential also to be so bad. Because you got Tyreek Hill, who on his best day is unstoppable. On his worst day is brutal to watch. Now, it's not often that it's his worst day. Does his attitude and his personal life and all that play a huge factor in whether or not, you feel good about him? Sure. To me, he still gets a 93 grade. He's still up there because until he shows that his speed is gone, that the things that made him a great player is gone, then it's hard to rank him really lower. The offense in general was just down last year in terms of their production. He had 121 targets, only 81 catches. That's 40 targets that didn't go their way, and only 3 of them were drops. He had a really good drop rate. His yards after catch were not good. So teams, again, that's teams playing press. That's teams playing, blitzing and putting pressure on the quarterback to get the ball out early. Keeping Tyreek Hill in front of them. It was really good strategy by a lot of the defenses this past year to get him that way. And his ability in that cheetah motion, as they call it, out of the slot to the wide position. Our team's going to figure that out. Can't give them a lot of time to do that. His deep and intermediate is still very good. Still like elite level play. It's hard to argue it. Especially on those like 12-yard crossing routes that we see, where if you catch a team in man coverage, or you catch a defensive back, a nickel back, playing too shallow, then yeah, Tyreek Hill is going to kill you every single time. He still has that great ability to do that. It's just, I don't remember the last year he had less than 1,000 yards. That could be a little bit concerning. He only had 6 touchdowns. I wonder what this year looks like for him, because there is these like weird locker room issues with Miami as well. You saw Raheem Mostert speak out. Jalen Ramsey got traded. Tyreek Hill himself has been in situations online where he's been talking about not being a part of the team and leaving and getting traded or getting cut, or I think one time he even said he might retire or something like that. It was just these weird, I don't want to be here and I don't really care anymore expressions from him. And that definitely affects what he could be on the field, because so much, Tyreek Hill is not some elite level route runner. He's not specifically physical. Tyreek Hill's skill set is that he is faster, more agile, more shifty than everyone else on the field by such a significant margin that he's basically unstoppable. That he's impossible to stop. That requires a lot of effort from him, though. To run full speed every play, stop on a dime, all that. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work than just running a 5-yard out route really well. Not saying that doesn't take a lot of effort, but sprinting full speed from one set of numbers to the other set of numbers, making sure you don't run into anybody, and then catching the ball, making sure you turn upfield, and maintaining your speed, maintaining your separation is a lot different than being just a really great route runner, getting open, catching the ball, like doing a Drake London type of a deal. It's a very different skill set. So there is concern here. There is concern that he could play like an 83 grade more than a 93 grade, and that it overall just drags the whole offense down, because the offense does live and breathe through his production and through the excitement that he brings and the fear that he puts in defenses that make them play so far off the ball so many times that then you get to pick them apart in the run game. because you're not going to play 8 guys in the box. You're almost never going to play 7 guys in the box when you have this type of a speed guy out there. You want the bodies out there that can compete, that can get on him. And that's opened up so many opportunities for this run game. But when Tyreek Hill's not on and you're able to put 7 in the box, there isn't a whole lot that this offense can offer at that point. And then even when you move on to Jalen Waddle, he gets an 85 grade for me, despite a down statistical year as well. You know, much more of an outside guy, but him and Tyreek Hill very similar in what they bring to an offense. He had 58 catches. He only had 2 scores. Didn't have a whole lot of yards after catch either. And that's like a huge part of his game. Now, Jalen Waddle comes in. He's supposed to be much more of a route running specialist for them. But there really wasn't a whole lot of that going on last season. You know, and outside of his rookie year, it's sort of also been another downward trajectory for Jalen Waddle since then. Gradual, but this is barely wide receiver 2 production. So you're hoping that you can just throw out last season as an anomaly of injuries and locker room issues. And now that you're all back together, and this could be a 1,000-yard receiver pairing, double-digit touchdowns each. I wouldn't be shocked if that became the case, because that potential is there. My worry is that Jalen Waddle is sort of peaked as well, and now it's the downfall of him because he's not developing he's not putting another notch on his belt in terms of his ability. He's not adding pages to his skills, to the book of skills that he has. You know, like you see that with linemen a lot, with a lot of defensive linemen and pass rushers a lot. Like, they'll have a great swim move, but they don't really have like this toolbox of pass rush moves, and they kind of end up falling off. They'll have a great season once, and then it'll just never repeat itself. You can have that same thing when you're a receiver. If you just rest on your laurels of what got you by in college and you come in, you're a dynamic rookie, the pros then just figure you out, and then you have to add some stuff to your game. And maybe it's the limitations again that the offense needs to have because of Tua. That's possible as well. I mean, I'm not saying for a second that Jalen Waddle wouldn't be more productive if he played for Kansas City or for Buffalo. But who's to say that he would be significantly more productive than 744 yards and 60 catches? It's hard to say. It's really hard to say at this point because you lose faith in these top-level players. You can't just... You rank a guy an 85, and it's because, I'm trying to be fair and not just biased to my own opinions about effort and potential, but, he could play easily like a 75. Why wouldn't he? There's a world where Nick Westbrook-Ikini is the most dynamic player in this offense on a consistent basis week to week. Playing like this slot outside role, like they all kind of have like slot capabilities and outside capabilities. But what do you do at tight end now that Jonnu Smith is gone? That was a huge part of your offense last year that you just let go. I don't understand why getting rid of him was an option. If you needed to include someone, an extra piece in that trade package, the Minkah Fitzpatrick, Jalen Ramsey trade package, sort of work out the cap situation, I guess, of it all. Why not just use another day 3 pick? Like I don't get it. I don't get that move because now you got Pharaoh Brown, you got Julian Hill, and then you trade for Darren Waller for like a pick swap, a 6th and 7th round pick swap with the Giants. Thanks for the free pick, I guess, as a Giants fan. Bringing Waller out of retirement, but Waller's been off for 2 years now? Probably 2 years now, or at least a year and a half. And he's going to come in. He's just going to, be another slot receiver for you? Another big slot in the passing game? What are you really going to get out of him in this offense? And an offense that you like, that in this McDaniel Shanahan style offense, you like playing with a fullback on the field and running some zone blocking. And the one thing Darren Waller didn't want to do with the Giants that made him retire is he didn't want to block. So what good is he here? I don't think he upgrades the tight end room at all. That's why he gets an NA for grade, because I don't know what to grade him at this point. if he's even on the team. Like, is it worth even thinking about what he could produce when you look at the way this offense runs? What does he bring? He's at best a downgrade to what you had in Jonnu Smith. So it just really made no sense to me. And like, you got D. Eskridge, who's just like a worse version of what you have in Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I really loved Malik Washington and Taj Washington. But what are they going to do in this offense other than what you see from the better versions of them here? Especially with the way that they run this offense in a rather predictive way. Devon Achane is a great back out of the backfield. He's gonna give you a lot in the passing game, and that's going to be designed to do that. It's going to be a lot of play action screens. It's going to be a lot of swing passes out there. Get him in space, let him execute. He's going to produce really well in that scenario. I think Ollie Gordon, that's the next man up as a receiving running back. I think giving him a lot of work could be very beneficial as well. Ollie Gordon's got this like Chuba Hubbard like college career, and you see what Chuba Hubbard now is. So, maybe Ollie Gordon steps in and surprises everyone and elevates the run game to a higher level, which then helps the overall offense run the way that they run best. And it keeps the defense sort of on its toes, where now, because you have this great, well-rounded, two-headed monster running game, three-headed monster running game like they had at their peak, you got to play 7 guys in the box, and that's going to open up things for these speedier guys. But in order for this offense to work and with these skill sets to work, it's very dependent on how well they run the ball. And they don't even necessarily have a bad room. Like I said, they're tied for 10th for me, so 10th to 11th, give or take. Just inside the top 10, just outside the top 10. We got Devon Achane, who plays with his hair on fire. He's very... I was watching some of the highlights of him that I'm going to be playing up right now, and it kind of reminds me of like a little bit of a faster Maurice Jones-Drew. Like, you get these compact guys, but he's not afraid of contact. Like 590 yards after contact on 907 yards. It's only 4.5 yards per carry. You'd expect a guy of like his speed and his shiftiness to have more 15-plus yard runs than just 10. But out of 190 carries there, it's not terrible. You'd like for him to maybe get a little bit more. He only counted for 38 first downs, 32 missed tackles forced. He only put the ball on the ground once. He's a very good back. He's a much more well-rounded than you would expect. There's a lot more speed and power mixed in there than what you would expect out of him. And I think that it adds an aspect to this offense that maybe people might have missed when he first came into the league as a rookie. And then you have Jalen Wright, who's expected to fill into that Raheem Mostert role. That's why they picked him up last year, so they can sort of just streamline, replace the veteran. But I love the pickup of Ollie Gordon. He only gets a 74 grade for me as a pure runner right now. But like I said, with the Chuba Hubbard thing, you can get him working and get him executed, and after a couple of years, he builds up like Chuba Hubbard did. You might have a star back as well. And hopefully by the time you pay Devon Achane, you might be able to pay Ollie Gordon a little bit, and then he'll break out after that. And then you'll have a great two-headed monster, and you'll be a top 7 running back room after that. Alexander Mattison kind of is what he is. I'm not super into Alexander Mattison. I never really was. But I think he does bring a different aspect to this offense than Achane and Wright. I think he's much more of a straightforward. You can give him the ball, and he can beat up on a defense a little bit for you. I think that's an important mix to have in there. I think that's a good addition to the room, even though he is 4th for me in terms of ability. I think on the overall team depth chart, he's probably going to be 3, and he'll probably get some more early down work, and Jalen Wright will be more of like a 3rd down sub for Devon Achane, and Madison will be more of an early down guy. Give Ollie Gordon a little bit of time to beat those guys out, but I don't expect Achane to have less than 1,200 all-purpose yards this year. I think he could easily get the 10 touchdowns overall and be a really effective part of this offense, and could end the year as the best offensive player on the team. I think there's a world where that's very likely to happen. I just wonder what happens if he takes a step back, or if the offensive line is significantly worse than they were last year. I think that's a huge concern for what they could be, because this is a type of offense that runs through, and it's dependent on how well you're running the ball. And what you're getting here is an offensive line that it's bad. They're the worst pass blocking offensive line, which is a nightmare for Tua Tagovailoa. And another reason why you got to play especially fast as an offense, because you can't really trust this offensive line to hold up, especially now with Teron Armstead gone. All you have now is Patrick Paul, who you drafted last year to come in. He's expected to start at left tackle. And he's expected to take the reins of Teron Armstead, who, would, give you, 10 games a year. But those are 10 really good games. Those games really helped. And now you're kind of just stuck with this developmental guy who you're hoping is ready after a season on the bench. And I don't know if that's necessarily fair, because his skill set, he's just not ready for anything, in my opinion. You drafted Jonas Savania, who comes in, he's your second best pass blocker right out the gate, but he's your worst run blocker. So it's like from an interior offensive lineman on Tua's blind side, on Tua's front side, where all the pressure, a lot of passing lanes are now going to be blocked off by. It's gonna be a rough year. They're 17th, tied for 17th in run blocking, 17th to 18th ish. Does Larry Borum find his way onto the field at the left tackle position? Because I think him and Paul, I assess them as being the same level of pass blocker coming in, which is just not good. But he's a much better run blocker, I think, coming in than Patrick Paul is. Then for Jonas Savania, you got Liam Eichenberg, who started last year, who might be a better overall player week one. But you play Savania because you want to develop, and he brings some good better pass blocking ability than what you get out of Liam Eichenberg, because I think you want to be able to pass the ball a little bit more, because the right side of your offensive line is where you're going to be running the ball the most, because you got two great run blockers there, starting with your center, Aaron Brewer, who's your best overall offensive lineman. He comes in, he's an 83 pass blocker, 714 snaps, gave up 2 sacks. Now, for the center, it's kind of hard to assess which pressures and hurries are truly his fault and sacks are truly on him, because we've touched on this before in previous videos. The center's job in pass blocking, you pick up a blitz in the A gap, like a double A gap blitz, you pick up the blitzer, whoever comes into your zone type of a deal, or you're helping in double teams when it's a 4-man rush. So it's a tough evaluation, but I think he has quick hands. He uses the skill set that he has in run block. He's an A- zone run blocker, which is a majority of what this offensive production is. 56% of the snaps were zone, only 32% were gap. He did terribly at it. So you're not going to see a lot of gap get called here. And also the skill set of the offensive line just isn't gap. That's not the McDaniel, Shanahan, Kubiak offense. And Aaron Brewer fits that zone blocking so perfectly well, because he does have fast hands. He does have the athletic ability to get off his spot and get out wide and pin interior offensive linemen and get up to the second level on the linebackers at the perfect time. He understands the concept of it. He communicates really well at the point of the snap with the offensive lineman to get protection slides, and he's a very good center. He's the bright spot of this line. And then you get to James Daniels, who up until he got injured early in the season with Pittsburgh was having a career year as a run blocker. It was fantastic. As a pass blocker, it was a hard eval because he didn't play a lot. And, the offense with Justin Fields for the most part that he played under, it was just, when you have a guy like that that's so incredibly limited, it's hard to assess in such a small sample size. But it wasn't particularly outstanding at all, and historically he's not as outstanding as a pass blocker either. But as a run blocker, this guy was he was mauling guys. He was getting out in space really well. He was, executing double teams, coming off of them, getting up to the linebackers, getting downfield, being really smart, really good feet. He was just great. So Miami being able to acquire him, it is an upgrade to the offensive line at that role. Even if he kind of falls down a little bit from the 90 grade because of the injury and everything, he's still an upgrade to what they had there last year. So the run game does stand. You got that middle of the pack run blocking at worst. Then you got Austin Jackson at right tackle. He's the blindside protection for Tua. Kind of tricked the Dolphins organization there. It looked like in his contract year, he finally became the guy they drafted in the first round. Like, it just took a while for him to develop. And then he immediately regressed back down to what he was before that. A little bit better. He was one of the worst offensive linemen of all time for a while there. But he regressed kind of back to, he regressed from his best season. Now he's like this low-end starting caliber right tackle, which, he can get back up to a higher level. If this offense strategy plays and puts him in a lot better positions, you never know what can happen. He is going to be competing with Larry Borum and Liam Eichenberg for those snaps because, Borum and Eichenberg are sort of these floating options in there with an offensive line that has a bunch of positions that aren't really decided, particularly left tackle, right tackle. You got injury concerns at right guard. So outside of Aaron Brewer and I would say Big Jonah, it's an offensive line that is very much up in the air, and it's an offensive line that's truly going to make or break what this offense is able to do, because if they can't pass protect, then you can't even start thinking about potentially letting Tua hold onto the ball a little bit longer, having these longer developing plays, because it's just not tenable if they can't protect. And you're going to see a lot of teams come out against them in these passing situations, and they're going to be playing press on the outside, and they're going to be blitzing, and they're going to take a risk that they're going to be able to get home before Tua is going to be able to decide who the open receiver is, and before Tyreek Hill or Jalen Waddle or Westbrook Ikini or D. Eskridge or whoever it is can get off the coverage. And they'll leave the middle of the field open. They'll rush those 2A gaps and get everyone in Tua's face. So we'll see how this offensive line, how this pass production, how they respond to that early threat, because it's gonna come fast at them, and teams are gonna be relentless, because the formula for beating Miami has been figured out. It's been established, and it was executed pretty much all of last year, and you're gonna see it come out again. So this offensive line, they better get some chemistry. The offensive line coach better get them going in pass protection, because if they ain't, they got to get themselves to play like a top 20 pass blocking unit if this offense is going to be able to keep them in games. So overall, it's my 20th ranked offense. They have a middle of the pack, their offensive coordinator, like we said, 23rd in pass offense. Again, the offensive line, a huge issue. Tua's limitations, an even bigger issue. And then the rush offense, top 12. I, again, really like Devon Achane. The offensive line is good enough to keep them functional, to not make Achane completely have to do everything on his own. And the deep running back room helps as well. He helps maintain a higher floor for what they can produce. They just need to play games on their terms offensively throughout the year, so then that way they aren't put in a position where it all falls on Tua and then the pass blocking comes into play and it could all fall apart real quickly. Now let's go to the defensive side of the ball, where a lot of benefit of the doubt is being given particularly to this defensive line, because there is so much of an injury history here. But we'll start out with Bradley Chubb, Chop Robinson, Jalen Phillips. Just a really good group here. And even a shout out to Quentin Bell, who you watch him play and you go, man, how has no one made him a starter? Was it just last year? Because I thought he was great. And, they're great in the time that he played. They're the fourth best pass rushing group for me, tied for sixth in run defense. Now, this is very much a best case scenario, because, there's so many injuries to account for here, particularly with the edge room. And we'll start with Bradley Chubb, who, He had 13 sacks, 70 pressures, 18th in win percentage, 816 defensive line snaps. The last time we saw him play, this is what he was capable of doing. Last time we saw him play healthy, this is what he was capable of doing. Now, you just have to hope that you can bring him back healthy so we can get back to this. You're really hoping that that's the case, because you got Chop Robinson, who last year was actually really great as a rookie. He came in, he did his job well, 7th in pass rush win percentage, 42 hurries, 7 sacks, 56 pressures on 562 snaps. So you hope that his snap count, you maybe get a snap count a little bit higher, and him being such a high level producer in those limited times, it will hopefully help keep Chubb and Phillips healthier longer, because you do want, when you have guys who have all this injury history, especially Phillips, you want to have a healthy rotation where you're only using them at their best. You're not out using them, because it's a long season, it's a long practice schedule, and if you want to get 13, 14 games out of the guys, you can't just run them ragged. Not guys like Jalen Phillips, unfortunately, who, when he does play, I think he produces really well. He's the most balanced out of all the edge rushers. He's the true 3-down all situation edge player out of this group. Which is unfortunate, because he's probably the one that you want to see on the field the least out of the 3. So does he get a lot of early down work, and then you see Chubb and Robinson just rush the passer in those passing situations, situational pass rushers? I don't know how they execute it. Do you execute it with Phillips and Quentin Bell as your early down edge players? And then run a more traditional 4-3 defense with, Kenneth Grant at nose tackle, Benito Jones out there, who Benito Jones is a really good option as well. He's I literally have him graded the opposite of Kenneth Grant, where he's a 76 pass rush, 70 against the run, and Grant's the opposite, 70 against the pass, 76 against the run. Grant was a first-round pick, so I expect him to come in. He's going to play that nose tackle role and open things up for Zach Seiler, who very quietly has put together a hell of a career the last couple of seasons. He's slowly creeped up into being one of the better interior defensive linemen, one of these high-floor guys who has the capabilities of blowing up games. It's very interesting to see. 10 sacks, 48th in win percentage. It's just 21 hurries. He's a really fun player to watch. And you get into the run defense here. I think he's just a fine run defender. He picks up guys really well. He knows how to blow up plays. He understands rush lanes and everything. He's still an interior defensive lineman, so he's not going to be the guy that always blows it up, but as a guy who knows how to cut off the run lanes and force them into the linebackers and then back into where he knows a majority of his players are going to be, he's really great at that. He's got really good balance to his game, good mix of athleticism and power. Sneaky good for a guy who nobody talks about. When Christian Wilkins left, count me as one of them going, I don't think Zach Seiler can carry this load for the interior defensive line. And I'm not saying that he did. I mean, they went out and got Kenneth Grant for a reason. But now that he's got a little mixture of guys in there, Benito Jones, Matt Dickerson, you get Jordan Phillips and Zeke Biggers, the rookies, who I didn't necessarily have good grades on at all, but they are rookies. They did invest in this interior defensive line quite a bit in terms of their rookie class. So there's going to be a nice little rotation next to him, healthy edge rushers, create some one-on-one opportunities, and Zach Seiler could very quietly have one of the better interior defensive lineman seasons this year. So I would watch out for him specifically as this real breakout player to push himself into that upper echelon of players at his position. I'm not saying he's going to be Jeffrey Simmons or Dexter Lawrence, but he's sort of right now sitting in that third tier of interior defensive linemen. I think he could be that middle to high second tier interior defensive lineman by the end of the year, flirting with those high 80 grades. Now with the linebackers, they're actually a pretty good group as well. I got them tied for 8th in pass coverage and tied for 13th in run defense. And I think Dodson and Brooks as your top two linebackers, they complement each other really, really well. Dodson's this great, athletic sideline to sideline pass coverage player who's going to play really good zone coverage. He didn't give up any touchdowns last year, 3 interceptions, 2 pass breakups, a 73 passer rating against him. Only gave up 371 yards. He wasn't terrible in run defense, but he just, his skill set doesn't necessarily suit being like this thumping run defender. He did have 80 tackles, 23 assists, 11 missed tackles, 9.6% missed tackle. That does hurt. That does hurt to see. Specifically because he doesn't make like these wow big splash plays in run defense. But that's why they have Jordan Brooks, who's sort of the opposite of that. I gets an 87 grade in the run. He did have an 11% missed tackle rate, but he was just plowing over guys, breaking up run plays, blowing up lead blockers, pulling guards and pulling tackles off their pathways and just really hurting opposing teams in the run game. So that's what he brings there, and he was doing really well in the short run situations, 11th in stops percentage among all linebackers. He blitzed pretty good, 20 pressures. They did specifically attack him in the passing game. That intermediate passing game opposing teams used against him. He was targeted 92 times. Now, he was on the field a ton, but teams really went after him, with their running backs and their tight ends. A lot of mesh was run against the Dolphins that set him up to fail. But I think overall, you can see that, this is the kind of group that you want when you're the Miami Dolphins. It's a compliment to what you have on the defensive line. Brooks is still a good athlete too, but you want have that linebacker that you can trust in coverage. You want that linebacker who you can put the green dot on and be a traditional Mike linebacker like Jordan Brooks. Their depth, with KJ Britt, Channing Tindall, it's okay. It's an okay kind of group. Behind him, Daquan Jackson, Willie Gay. He's the one I just don't understand. People think that he's like some great, he's going to be a really good linebacker 3 for them. I'm like, I think he stinks. I thought he was good, like maybe his rookie year in Kansas City. And I'm like, I don't get why people like him at all after that. But this is a good linebacker group. I think as an overall group, they're a top 10 group for sure. A top 10 pairing. And Terrell Dodson, he can always be put in better situations in run defense that will up his grade eventually too, right? So, Jordan Brooks, he's been hung up to dry in the run game and still executed. Sort of like he's been hung up to dry in pass coverage and hasn't executed. Now, if they can figure out ways to have Dodson pick up more of those targets and force teams to throw his way more than Jordan Brooks, how they go about that, I don't know. I'm not a defensive coordinator, but there's got to be a way to do that to take a lot of the pressure off of Jordan Brooks in those situations, and we'll see how they go about doing that. If it's just not a matter of developing Jordan Brooks' pass coverage game at this stage in his career, like year 6 or 7 it is for Brooks, so he kind of is who he is at this point. I don't know that his athleticism is going to necessarily start getting better. I think that's more Dodson's role on this team. Now, the secondary is a nightmare. This is a nightmare. Now, as of this recording, they haven't signed Asante Samuel Jr. They haven't signed any free agent corner you can think out there. They haven't signed them yet. So they're going into the season where their top 4 corners are Kadir Kahu, Artie Burns, Storm Duck, Cam Smith. They took Cam Smith day 2. Is this the year that he just breaks out of nowhere after showing nothing up to this point? You better hope so. Especially if you're not planning on signing anyone. I don't know how you field this cornerback room. Does Jason Marshall, the rookie, have like some breakout camp and he's like Tariq Woolen out there? I mean, maybe, but until they prove it, 31st in coverage, 21st, tied for 21st in run defense, because Kahoo, Artie Burns, Storm Duck, Cam Smith, Ethan Bonner, none of your corners are good in run defense. None of them. They are not starting caliber whatsoever in run defense. What was an embarrassing group a week and a half ago is now in one trade, now the strength of your secondary, which is the safety room, led by former Dolphin, former Steeler, current Dolphin, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who comes in off of arguably 2 down seasons in a row from Pittsburgh, where just 3 years ago he was, I think, the undisputed, him and Jesse Bates were the 2 best safeties in the entire league. He would have been like a 94, 95 grade in coverage. He would have been like an 80 something grade in run defense. Easy peasy. What a beast. Never gave up big plays, forcing turnovers, etc., etc. Now, last year, arguably one of his worst years. How much do you hold that against him? I'm not holding it against him as much as maybe other people are, but I can't say that these numbers are necessarily good. 43 targets, he gave up 33 of 43 targets, 5 touchdowns, only 1 interception, only 3 pass breakups, 134.1 passer rating when targeted. That's not the production of a guy that has been historically as great as him. Now, I don't believe that he just magically regressed down to this being the norm for him moving forward. Just because I don't see any significant sign of that. When you play defensive back in the NFL, you're bound to have a down year, especially when you play at such a high level that he played at. And there is, to a degree, he's kind of at the mercy of what's happening around him, because he can play really aggressive in run defense. He comes up, he's not afraid to hit. Could he be a better tackler? Could he have been better at identifying the run lane and filling it more appropriately and not playing so overly aggressive at times in the run game? Absolutely. That's why he comes in with a 73 grade. He's not exactly Julian Love out there when it comes to run defense and making the best decisions, but he has been before. So again, kind of like the coverage thing, how much do you punish him for that? Now, as defensive backs get older, they naturally become less physical. So I do kind of punish him a little bit more than I do in his coverage abilities, because I think when he comes here to Miami, he is going to be that deep center field safety. I could see them, even with this group that they have right now, playing a lot of cover 2 shell just to protect the lack of overall talent that they have out there. Now, they have Ashton Davis as a complement, who goes from being the best safety on the team to actually fitting into a role that he's probably better suited at, which is a number 2 safety. Now, he's probably going to play deep down the field also, which I do like. Again, the cover 2 thing, I think, is what you're going to see a lot from this team, just because they want to protect down the field. I think quarters is going to be very much in their future this year, with a lot of exotic blitzing and stunts happening in that front 4, front 7, front 6. It's going to be a lot of dime. Just, keep a mixture out there, hope for somebody to break out. Again, keep everything in front of you and hope that the front 4 can get home. I think you're going to see a lot of stunts and twists to sort of make up for the deficiencies here, make the offensive lineman think, make the quarterback think. I think a lot of these guys will be blitzing as well. And no real rhyme or reason for anyone other than just trying to confuse the opposing team. Because the best way to counteract not having such high-end talent at a certain position group is to do weird things with them, for the lack of a better term. To do unorthodox things with them. Now, again, like I said, I think Fitzpatrick and Davis, their roles are pretty much carved out back there. You get one side of the field, you get the other side of the field, don't let anyone behind you, and hope that these guys up front can play aggressive enough. I think you're going to see a lot of press, even though they're not necessarily a physical group. I think you'll see a lot of press again to mix in with a more aggressive front four, front six play that you're going to have to see from Anthony Weaver to make up for the lack of talent here. Because if they end up just sending 4 a majority of the time, they are going to get lit up. They will get lit up as a defense. It doesn't matter how good Minkah Fitzpatrick plays. They're in a lot of trouble. They have to add another corner. There isn't a corner out there. Like, even if they add Asante Samuel Jr., I think is the best corner I have graded on the market right now. If he's not number 1, he's number 2. And I can't think of who number 1 is. But if you said it, I probably would be like, that's who it is. So right now, let's just say he's number 1 or number 2. He wouldn't raise this defensive back and coverage group up any higher than 29th, 28th maybe, which is good for one player to raise a group up like that. But I think Asante Samuel Jr. is still better suited as like a high-end number 2 than him coming in being a low-end number 1 with really just this hodgepodge of guys who you don't know what you're going to get out of any of them. So this could be this kind of like the offensive line for the offense could be the inevitable downfall of this defense. But the defense does come in 15th in the league, almost smack dab in the middle. The 12th passing defense, because outside of what the defensive backs are bringing them, the front 4, front 6 is still so good that if it stays healthy enough, it'll make life easier for those guys on the back end. But if they start to go down, then there's going to be some issues. And the run defense, of course, you mix in the linebackers and some of the strong interior defensive line play that you have there. I really like what you can get out of the run defense here as well. Again, though, they got to stay healthy this year. This year, it's imperative they stay healthy with some of the deficiencies they're going to have, especially on the back end. Now, taking a look at their schedule, they're 21st in strength of schedule, 4.74. The Vegas over-under is 8.5. It's tough. It is tough. You know, I don't think they're good enough to beat Buffalo. They're not good enough to beat Baltimore or the Chargers. That's just not a thing. Luckily, in their division, they get the Jets twice. They should win the home game. Then you get them late in the year, you get an away game against them. It's going to be close. You know, they get the Saints at home. Huge advantage there. They get Cincinnati at home. They get Tampa at home. I like that they get New England twice because they're sort of, New England is, you know, they haven't shown up yet in the series. They're still a couple away, spoiler alert. But again, they, you know, a healthy front 4 for Miami matches up very well against New England, matches up very well against the Jets. You know, even against Carolina, Cleveland, Atlanta, they get those teams on the road. Indy, they get on the road. Pittsburgh, they get on the road. That's tough because they are ranked higher than Indianapolis, Carolina, Cleveland, and Atlanta. You know, not by much on some of them, but they are ranked higher. So, but getting those teams on the road does make things a little bit more iffy for them. But with 2 guaranteed wins, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, like, could go either way games. I could see them winning half of those games. I don't think that's out of the question. So that's why, you know, saying 8.5 wins, it's like 8 or 9 wins seems about right for Miami, as long as nothing particularly totally falls apart. Unfortunately, definitely not good enough to make the playoffs with some of the good teams there in the AFC now. But, you know, hovering around 500 should be what you see out of this team, all things considered. And overall, the 20th team, 20th head coach, 20th offense, and 12th overall defense. With some, again, specific key deficiencies that need to be coached up and protected with quality scheming from their head coach and their coordinators. So that's the real test here, is how well they can outthink and outmental their opponents to account for obvious issues. And there it is, my number 20 team in my 2025 NFL Deep Dive Series, the Miami Dolphins. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that you've taken the time to hit the like button, to leave your thoughts in the comment section below, and of course to subscribe and hit the notification bell. I mean, do 3 out of those 4 things for me, and we'll be really good. It'll keep pushing out this channel, and we'll eventually get to a much higher place where maybe people aren't so just like, ew, your channel's so small. I like it. I'm very comfortable with my size, but I'd like for it to be bigger, as all men would. So I'll see you guys with the next video next time.